Hey everybody, this is Steven from PopCultureMaven.com. We're back with this week's new comic book reviews, and even though Ryan at the comic shop says it's a small week, I don't consider this a small week. I mean, it's smaller in the sense of there's not, 30 titles to go through, but there's still quite a bit. So let's see what we can do. First up, we have Tales the Human Target #1, written by Tom King. So there's 4 artists. There's Greg Smallwood, who does the framing sequences, and then there's three interweaving stories. There's Raphael Albuquerque does the Guy Gardner Green Lantern sequence. Kevin McGuire does the Booster Gold sequence, and Mikel Janin does the Fire sequence. So what it is so they're stories with the Justice League International that is from the original series, because so basically in the original series that we've gotten the first 6 issues, and then the 7th issue is going to be coming soon, but this is kind of intern kind of short stories. So what it is they're tales of Christopher Chance, who has met these characters before. That's really all I want to give away. Basically each story has to do with a character. Like Booster Gold is trying to, he's a bodyguard for a writer, and it's typical Booster Gold. He's just kind of a jerk. Fire is she's with a photographer who gets shot, and that really is kind of the most it's really a sad story, or bittersweet, because she was just a model at the time. She didn't have her powers, and the photographer gets shot, and she stays with him until he dies, and then she stays with him until he's buried. And then the Guy Gardner story is about this guy who becomes basically he becomes a part of the Brother Blood. So he becomes this racist, and Guy Gardner just like, well, he's some rich kid who's become like an asshat, and I'll just go beat him up. Typical Guy Gardner fashion. So it's really interesting, and I like how King interweaves the stories, how they all actually have to do with Christopher, but you don't find that out until later on in the stories. First of all, I love the Human Target story that he's doing with Greg Smallwood, but this is kind of nice. They're basically 3 short stories that are outside the continuity per se of the regular series that's going on, but it's just a nice package. There's 3 great artists. I mean, all Albuquerque, McGuire, and Janin they're all really brilliant artists, and then you have, like I said, Greg Smallwood does some framing sequences for it, but it's really a good book. I mean, if you're not reading Human Target, it's really a wonderful book that King and Smallwood are doing, and it's really worth checking out. This does stand alone in that respect, and so if you haven't been reading the Human Target, this actually gives you a good taste of what they're doing, what King's doing in that regular book. So that's really recommended this week. Next up, we have End After End #1, written by David Andre and Tim Daniel, with artwork by Sandano C. So what the basic premise is this guy, he's at a metro station, and he sees this like flying bug or whatever. He takes a picture, and he gets transported to this unknown place, and he's in the middle of a war, and he finds out that the bug he was taking picture is like a fairy, and it's all these different people from different times are fighting a battle. And that sounds all neat, and like at the beginning of it, it's like, okay, this is kind of interesting, but there's major problems here, in the sense of, first of all, we don't even get to know the name of the guy. I tried to look back and see if I could see who it was, but as far as I could tell, They didn't mention his name that I re-noticed. And he's just kind of thrown into this situation where, okay, it's all neat and everything, but it doesn't really explain anything. And the problem with that is there's just nothing to cling on to. I mean, you know the main character, and you know he doesn't want to fight and stuff like that, and that's all neat and everything, but I don't really know him at all. I know that he's just a normal guy, but beyond that, we don't know anything. And it was really frustrating because it was like, I think it's a decent concept, but it just there was just not really enough there to like care beyond the basic, okay, he doesn't want to fight, and you know, he gets caught in the middle of a battle. That's really it, that all that happens in this first issue. You don't know why they're there or anything, and it's like that's kind of a big problem, is there's nothing to latch on to. I will say Sedano C's artwork is actually pretty decent. It's a pretty decent looking book. It's just a shame because it really just kind of misses the mark, because even I get you don't necessarily want to give everything away in the first issue, but there's nothing here to give away. So that's kind of a problem. So that's a definite pass on that. Next up, we have Detective Comics number 1063, written by Ram V and Raphael Albuquerque. There's a backup story with Commissioner Gordon, and it is by Simon Spurr and Danny. So the main, really, it's kind of hard to explain because Ram V is still setting up this story, but it's what it is. So this particular issue has with Two-Face, where it's not that he's gone good, he's just not Two-Face anymore. And so Batman's trying to track down this like new set of villains, and it's very noir oriented. Like I said, Ram is still setting up the story here, but what's interesting is that this group is basically gets a hold of Harvey and turns him back into Two-Face, instead of him trying to you know, get back to society. And that's really kind of what happens in this issue. I mean, I really don't want to say too much more, because I really don't want to give you know, the story away, because there's a lot of subplots that he's putting in that's leading to, you know, this new villain that he's Ram's leading up to. But I will say I love Raphael Albuquerque's artwork. It's a really good looking book. And I just like that it's kind of a detective noir, which is a lot different than the regular Batman book. And I like the fact that, because Chip Zdarsky's writing that book, I like that they're separate books, and that they're really treating them separately and doing their own thing. I think that's actually really, really good. That way, if you just want to read detective, you can. If you want to read them both, you know, and that's great. And the Commissioner Gordon backup story is really, really good. It's he discovers like this kid who is just like, he doesn't know who he is, but the cops are hunting him down, and it's he kind of then he falls into the mystery of, it's the son of this hooker, and you know, so he ends up following, and then he finds out that there's something going on with her, and it's a really interesting story. And I'm really a big fan of Danny's artwork, and it really gives it a nice gritty feel. And even though it's different creative team, more so with two different writers, Spur really, you know, this really fits with the mood of the main story, where it's definitely noir infused, and both stories are really good. Like I said, they're still in their early stages of setting up the stories, but I'm really liking where both the stories are going. So this is definitely a book to watch. I am really enjoying it. Like I said, we're still kind of setting things up, but it's moving along nicely. It's each, you know, the second issue builds nicely on the first one, which is what you want. So I think this one's definitely worth checking out. And I'm a really big fan of Ram V's writing. So this one I think is it's definitely, you should be picking up. It's a book that's going to be really interesting to watch. Next up, we have Grimm number 4, written by Stephanie Phillips and with artwork by Flamingo. So Jess has Death's scythe, his staff, and so she finds out that, like, she doesn't remember how she died or anything. So we know that part of the story. So it's obviously there's something going on with her, and Death is not around. I mean, she's a Grim Reaper along with Eddie and Marcel. And so what it is after the last issue, basically the lady that's like taken over like Death's position, because he's off somewhere. She's like, she basically, like, we need to take her out. She's starting to learn about her secret, which we don't know yet. So Jess, Marcel, and Eddie escape, and they end up in the scythe takes them to Las Vegas. And the reason it takes them to Las Vegas is that is where Death is, and at the end of this issue they do find Death. That's not a secret, because we know that that's why they're there. What's interesting is how that Jess has this ability to, like, be not only a Grim Reaper, but she can be real too. Like, she can interact with people in the real world where Eddie and Marcel cannot. So that's still an interesting thing, and why she has the Death's scythe is very interesting. So it'll be interesting to see where they go. I'm really enjoying this. I think this is a nice take on kind of that Death, underworld, Satan, well, not really Satan, but Death and all that kind of stuff. And like I said, we still don't quite know what the mystery of Jess is. So that, but the story's moving along nicely. Phillips is doing a good job with the pacing and everything. And Flavingo's artwork, I really enjoy the artwork on this book. This has been really a surprising book. It just kind of came out of nowhere, but I think it's just good, solid, storytelling with nice art, and that's why I'm really enjoying it. Next up, we have Damage Control number 1, written by Adam F. Goldberg and Hans Rodenoff, with artwork by Will Robson, and there's a backup story by Charlotte Fullerton McDuffie and with the artwork by Jay Fosgett. So Dwayne McDuffie created Damage Control. Really, what the initial premise was, so when there's a battle in New York or whatever, Damage Control came in to clean it up. That was the basic premise. Now the premise is kind of mutated in it still is that, but there's also, they kind of work hand in hand with the heroes, and so it's kind of like a little bit of both. And so the main story has Bart has been working there for a while, and he's interviewing a new kid, Gus. He sends him to the mailroom, and he basically has to deliver packages. First he gets an ice cream cake that he has to deliver, and that you got to deliver that before the mail because it's going to melt. And then so it's kind of very tongue in cheek. They also there's, I mean, it starts off their interview. Bart is interviewing Gus in a coffee shop, and so Moon Knight's there, and they spell his name wrong on the cup, coffee shop, and it's just really interesting. I like how they kind of, like, I mean, the original premise that Dwayne McDuffie came up with was really good, but I like how it's mutated where they're kind of working with superheroes, and you see a lot of heroes within the story. And I won't give away, there's a really great scene with Nightcrawler that's really a lot of fun. And it's a lot of fun. And so Adam F. Goldberg, you might know, because he is the creator and writer of the Goldbergs on ABC. So he definitely has comedy chops, and he really has a lot of fun here, and I think that's what makes it really enjoyable. And then Will Robson's art is really, really nice. It's really just, it has a bit of a cartoony style, which is kind of perfect. for the story, because it really captures like the visual humor of the story. And then the backup by Charlotte Fullerton McDuffie, which is Dwayne Duffy's wife, or the late Dwayne McDuffie's wife. And Jay Fosgett does the artwork on that. And what it is, it's not so much an origin story, but it's a story of Bart when he first works there, and his mom comes to visit, and they go to the damage control gift shop. She ends up buying this necklace that has one of the Infinity Stones, and then Thanos comes along because he's missing the Infinity Stone, and basically it's a fight with, she turns into like this kind of monster, and then there's a fight between her and Thanos. It's just freaking hilarious, and it's just a lot of fun. Both stories are really a lot of fun, so it'll be interesting to see how it goes from here, because I think it's a mini series. And it'll be interesting because I think each issue is going to have just a different story. So it's a lot of fun. It's really charming. Like I said, the stories are a lot of fun. The artwork's really nice. I think it's worth checking out, especially because it's kind of something different. And it's not a book you normally see from Marvel, where it's just fun. They don't have a lot of fun books, so it's definitely worth checking out. Next up, we have Sins of the Black Flamingo, number 3, written by Andrew Wheeler, with artwork by Travis Moore. So we saw that Sebastian Harlow, was killed last issue. So he is brought back to life. One of his friends, who is basically like a witch, and she brings him back to life. And so what it is, so now he's back because he's been trying to rescue Ezekiel the angel, and then there's the golem that he rescued, Abel. So now there's a love triangle between the three of them. So it's Abel that Abel is actually, because when he was brought back to life, he was in a pool of mud, basically Abel. And so now they're actually connected. So if Sebastian dies, then Abel dies. So they're actually connected. And of course, Abel is in love with Sebastian, but Sebastian is in love with Ezekiel, and now we have a giant love triangle. So there's that going on, and then Sebastian goes back to get, I think it's the Devil's Tooth or something like that has this power to see like everything, like the future of like everything. And it basically, when he first got it, he touched it, and he was like, it took him like 2 years to recover mentally from seeing everything. And so then we find out that somebody has been looking for this, and now he has now lost it. And that now brings up the whole thing is like, okay, how does Ezekiel and everybody fit into this whole thing? Because obviously there's more going on that we know. I like what Wheeler's doing here. I like how, it started off as a basic, kind of like thief story, but it's kind of gotten so much bigger. And I also like the fact that there's this, this love triangle. Like he's a normal human person. And I also like the fact that this is a great, LGBTQ comic, which is really great. It's very, there's definitely no gray area what is going on with the love triangle here, but it's done very tastefully and everything. And I think it really brings more of a human story to this just heist, kind of premise. And I really appreciate Wheeler, pulling all these things together. It's just, it's nice to see, and it's really done really tastefully and everything, and that is a big plus. And it's handled really, really well. And then I am a huge Travis Moore fan. He is a really great artist, and he just, once again, there's a lot of times where there's just standing around, when they're talking and stuff, and he really brings that all to life. And once again, with the relationship, it's handled really well. He's a really great artist, and just the whole package is just so well done. And I also like the fact that at the end of this issue, there's like, oh, there's, you know, we're kind of back to the thief thing, and now we have like, you know, there's like this very powerful tooth, and this black tooth, and you're just like, oh, this is messed up. So it's going to be really interesting. I'm really still enjoying the book, and I think it's still well worth checking out. Next up, we have Minor Threats #1, written by Patton Oswalt and Jordan Bloom, with artwork by Scott Hepburn. So what this is so there's a sidekick villain, Frankie. Her mother was a bad guy or bad person. And so she's just gotten out of jail. And so she's working at this bar that basically caters to villains. It's a villain bar. And so she really she doesn't want to be a villain anymore. She's like, I've done my time. And so she's working. It's a really crappy bar, and everybody treats her like crap because they're all villains. But what happens is there's this villain Stickman who has killed Kid Dusk, one of the members of the Insomniac. And so they're hunting they're chasing villains down, and like, where is Stickman? Where is he? Like, all hell is broken loose, and they live in a part of town that the heroes normally don't go to. And so then what it is Frankie ends up not so much to become a villain again, but she gets a team of villains together. It's like, we need to hunt down Stickman because we can't have heroes like basically harassing us anymore. So that's the basic premise of this story. It was very interesting because at first I wasn't quite sold on the story. I'm reading it, but I think once you kind of figure out, once they introduce the Stickman murdering Kid Dusk premise, I think it really does change. Like, it really kicks the story into overdrive. And then you realize that Oswald and Bloom were really setting up Frankie, which is really good. We got to know about Frankie. We got to learn about the bar. I think it's in some ways that part, it's exposition. So it's a little mundane, but then you realize that it's like, oh, we needed to know all this stuff so we can get to that part of the story. So sometimes that does happen, but as long as the story it kind of pulls you back and like, oh, okay, that's what they were doing, it's perfectly fine. It's just, like I said, at first I'm reading it and I'm like, okay, this is nice, but where are we going with this? Because this is not really that exciting quite yet. So I'll give him that. Hepburn's artwork's actually nice. It does a nice job. And I really, like I said, once it got going, I really like the premise. So it'll be really interesting to see where they take the story in the next issue. But I think it's well worth checking out this week. Next up, we have Batman White Knight presents Red Hood #2, with the story by Sean Murphy, a script by Clay McCormick, and the artist is there's two artists, George Cambadias and Simon DeMio. So this is a side story that takes place in between the issues of the Batman White Knight Batman Beyond story. So this is a side story with Red Hood Robin working with a new Robin. So I like the first issue, but the second issue just, like, it was okay. It just seemed to tread a little bit of water and everything. Like, it was kind of like, I got it and everything. It's almost like the story was like 1.5 issues, but it kind of seemed to get stretched out a little bit in the second issue. I don't think it was bad, and I think it does fill in some holes from the main Batman Beyond White Knight story that's going on. But this, like I said, the second issue was like, okay. I don't think it was terrible, and I think if you're reading it, I think you're probably gonna, like this, but also I think if you're reading the main story, you don't, and you know, we'll see as that regular series miniseries goes on. But I wouldn't say so far that it was something I think that you're necessarily going to need to read. So I think maybe because it could be that Murphy was more involved with the first issue than this issue, and so that may have had it. Artwork wise, it's a nice looking book and everything. I wasn't overwhelmed. I really liked the first issue. The second issue was just kind of so, you know. Next up, we have the Lonesome Hunter #3, written and drawn by Tyler Crook. So what we have is Loopy and Howard have. Loopy had stolen a pocket watch from her uncle. The Ravens had killed her uncle, and then we find out that Howard has the sword that basically the sword is like divine sword that kills creatures throughout the years, and that's what Howard's did. Now Howard's like an old man, but it's extended his life. He's lived for hundreds of years because he has this sword. So they go back to where Loopy's uncle was killed. They capture one of the crows to say, hey, you know, who's behind this? And the crow's like, it's the queen of the crows. And so they're like, well, maybe we can make a deal with her and just give her back the pocket watch. And the deal is, we'll give you the pocket watch and you leave us alone. And so they go on the road trip they take the crow. They capture the crow. He takes them to the queen. They get there, and it's like, guess what? She doesn't want to really make the deal, and she's like, oh, I'll take the pocket watch, but I want the sword too. So that's where that goes. So we're kind of in that. So it'll be really interesting to see. I'm really enjoying this book. This book, I think what's I like about it is how Crook is actually giving so much story to both Lupe and Howard that it really just that's what this book's about, and I really love it. And we get to see some backstory on Lupe and how she ended up with her uncle. You know, her parents passed away. We knew that. And so we kind of get to know her struggles a little bit more. And it was really great. I really love that part of the story. And Crook, not only is story good, but his art was this is a just great looking book. I mean, the color work he's doing with the artwork is just absolutely fabulous. And I'm really loving this book, and you definitely need to be checking it out. Next up, we have The Swamp Thing, number 16, written by Ram V and with artwork by Mike Perkins. So this is the final issue, and yes, I know, why review a final issue? Well, I'm reviewing the final issue because this is a book you have not been picking up. And so even though this is the last issue, when the trade of the first story, the first half of the story arc is already out, the next one will come out. Hopefully they'll do a thing that collects both of them. My guess is hopefully a hardcover of this. So this is the final battle between Levi and Swamp Thing and the villain, and it all comes together. It does end the story, but obviously there's room to tell more stories down the road with different characters beyond different villains, shall we say. And I really have to give Ram B that he got Swamp Thing. There's been many attempts at Swamp Thing, some good, some not so good. This one's one of the good ones. And not only has the story been great, but Mike Perkins has been knocking it out of the park with the art. The artwork is absolutely stunning. This is like one of the best Swamp Thing books post Len Wein's last story arc with Kelly Jones, which was amazing. But Ram V definitely has picked up the mantle and really has done Swamp Thing proud. And it's really a book that if you did not read it, I cannot recommend it enough. It's really, really wonderful. And just great. And like I said, Mike Perkins has been doing the artwork. It's really amazing. Next up, we have Crossover 3D Special, written by Donnie Cates and with artwork by Jeff Shaw. and the 3D process conversion by D. Cuniff. So what this basically, all this is a reprint of the first issue in 3D. So there's some new material, very minor new material in the back, and mostly like covers and stuff that has been converted into 3D. And look, I'm not the biggest 3D in the fan, but I am a big crossover fan. So I will forewarn you, I don't think the 3D conversion on this was particularly good. There's some parts that are good. Some parts are just not in focus correctly. Basically, even if you're a fan of crossover, I'd say I would skip this because it's just a reprint of the first issue. I was kind of hoping that there'd be more new material. The new material isn't enough to really justify. It's a really high cover price. It's $9. It's a neat novelty and everything, but really in the end, I just don't think it was worth it. It was actually kind of disappointing. And like I said, the 3D. Personally, I think I would have really liked to. I think the smarter thing would have been to wipe the color and then just do the 3D effect. Maybe, I don't know, but it just, there's some of it that looks good, but a lot of it just didn't look good. So it's kind of disappointing. Next up, we have Detective Comics 27, Facsimile edition. So what this does is this reprints in its entirety Detective Comics 27, which is the first appearance of Batman. By Bob King. And let's not forget, this is really a good example of what Bob Kane's Batman was and what Bill Finger ultimately did. So basically the Batman we know is Bill Finger. So but yes, Bob Kane did come up with the quote unquote genesis, but all the other stuff we don't want to forget him, or the other creator that I just mentioned. That it's late, sorry folks. But what's interesting is I think it really gives you a glimpse of what comics used to be before superheroes, and they're all neat and everything. The one thing that obviously they are of their time, so there's a lot of racial stereotypes, a lot of not politically incorrect things. But it kind of shows you that really comics were pretty basic. They were kind of like there's humor strips in them, almost like one page. A lot of like detective type stories, obviously Detective Comics. I once again, I think it's more of an interesting look at the history of comics from that period, pre really superheroes. And I mean, obviously this is post Superman, because Siegel and Schuster have a story in here, but it's not Superman. So I think it's just like a glimpse. It gives you a good, I mean, they've reprinted this a number of times, and there are, they've reprinted, Batman and Detective, but I think, this is a small enough price tag that you can kind of go in. It's also neat to see the ads of that period, because most of these ads are like, I mean, the interesting ones on the back with like a printing press. You actually could send away for your own printing press. My guess is it was probably this big, but it's like the stuff you used to send away for. And they have blank cartridges, learn to throw your voice, so things like that are kind of neat. I mean, it is always neat to see. The Batman story has been reprinted a lot, but a lot of the other stories have not. So that's what's interesting about this. Next up we have, and finally we have Firepower. Oh, no, we got two more. Sorry. Firepower number 30, written by Robert Kirkman and Chris Samnee. So basically this issue is the next to last, finishing up this big story arc that, so they're going after the Snake Master and this giant dragon, and it's not looking good. It's Owen versus the dragon, and then the other masters are going after the snake villain. It's a giant battle issue. It's insane. Sam Neill, just visually, it's just, there's some spectacular stuff. It's almost mostly like a silent story. There's not a lot of dialogue in this issue. I mean, there's a lot of story, but not necessarily dialogue. And it just, like I said, I love this book to death. It's the best. It's one of the best books going right now that you're not reading. I love this book, and so hopefully when the story arc's over, there are collections of the first story arc. We're in the second one. Definitely pick this book up. It's really, really just, it's a damn good book that you're just not reading. I cannot recommend Firepower enough. Next up, we have Public Domain number 3, written and drawn by Chip Zdarsky. So what it is Sid Dallas, who created this superhero character, has found out that he actually owns the character. That there was something, either he didn't sign the paperwork, or the paperwork didn't take full control, or he was supposed to get control back. So Tonya, the assistant who sent him the email saying, "Hey, you actually own this character," she got fired. So she that's going on. So so we don't quite know. I mean, obviously she still fits into the story. But really, this issue has to do with Dave and Miles. How it's not that the kids are kind of losers. I mean, but Miles has a gambling issue. He owes money to, like, to pay his debt. So his dad basically at this point makes an agreement with the owner, the giant conglomerate that owns his character, or thinks to own his character. And so I won't give it away, but he does something that, like, maybe is a good idea. I mean, he helps to get money to bail Miles out. Well, where Dave is just like, he quit his tattoo job while he was getting fired. So there's that going on. So basically, I think it's very possible the sons are going to be involved with working with the dad on the comic. But we shall see. Like I said, I don't want to give too much away, but I really, once again, this is very timely because there's been a lot of issues with creators' rights and stuff, and I think the timing on this book by Zdarsky is really interesting. So I'm really enjoying it. It's a lot of fun. There's some great twists and turns because it's kind of it's a slice of life type story. But it still has to do with comics because of him being with Sid being a comic book creator. So still worth checking out. I really enjoy it. There was some great twist in this third issue. And finally, we have Rogues Gallery number 2, written by Hannah Rose May with artwork by Justin Mason. So the first issue was about this group of geeks, nerds, who love the comic but hate the television show that the comic is based on. The show's been going for 8 seasons, and the lead characters played by Maisie. So the first issue had their story leading up to them going to her house to get the first issue appearance that she has acquired. Because she, as far as they're concerned, well, she's part of the problem with the show, and she doesn't appreciate the comic, and she shouldn't have it. And so this issue is very interesting because instead of continuing that story, they actually backtrack to show Maisie's story leading up to the end of the first issue with them heading to the house. And so it's really interesting because I really wasn't expecting that, but it was a really smart move on May's part to do that with the story in this second issue. And it really, I think, is really interesting because Maisie actually has pointed out that that they're not following the comic book, and she's like, "Hey, I actually read the comic. We need to follow the comic." So it's interesting that she actually appreciates the comic, and yet the geek, the online community or whatever, complain about it, that it's not faithful to comics. So it's really, I think the third issue on this is going to be really intriguing to see, now that these two stories are coming together. And now that we've learned her side of the story, and I like how it's kind of like the second issue is really a first issue. It's just telling, instead of interweaving those, Hannah has broken those off. And I think it's actually really helped the book, and I think it's a wise idea. And Mason's artwork's really nice. It does a nice job of doing everything. There's a lot of just talking heads in this issue, and he does a nice job. It's a good looking book, and a really intriguing story. It'll be interesting to see where that third issue goes. So it's definitely worth checking out. That's going to do it this week. Wow, we're not doing too bad. As always, public service announcement. I get all my comics at Pulp Fiction Comics in Long Beach, California. Ryan Skinner runs a great store there. Annie, Eduardo are there. Wendy is there. Derek Easley does all their social media stuff. They have a live unboxing every Tuesday, so you can get previews of what's coming out on Wednesday. And it's a great store. Like I said, great customer service. They offer a pull service. You get a discount on your comics. They offer 30% off of trades and graphic novels. They also have a discount on mangas. It's really nice. It's a small store, but really nice. There is a sister store, separate owner, Chris. It's Pulp Fiction Culver City. Chris runs that store with her team. A lot of pretty much the same services and discounts. So if you're in the LA area, that store is it's a really good store. But I'm in the Long Beach area, so Ryan is my go-to comics crack dealer, as so to speak. But it's both really good stores and really great customer service with both of them. And as always, we end our show with please be kind. Kindness doesn't cost anything. Things are still tough out there. But being kind is very important, and just take care of yourselves, be safe out there, and be kind to each other, and just take care of yourselves. Support your local comic shop. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe to the YouTube channel. Leave comments. And just take care of yourselves. So we'll do it again next week. This is Steven from PopCultureMaven.com signing off for this week. Thanks for watching. Take care of yourselves. Bye-bye.